She's alive. A girl is pulled from the rubble as Italian rescue crews search for more earthquake survivors. American University targeted. New information about a deadly terrorist attack on a campus in Afghanistan. From building walls to mending fences, Donald Trump outlines his immigration plan. And tornado outbreak.
I shut the door and then it blew my window out.
Indiana storm victims surveyed the damage. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, August 25th, 2016. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. We're following a disturbing developing story from Mississippi where two Catholic sisters were apparently murdered. The women served as nurse practitioners in Lexington. When they didn't show up to work today, police went to their home in Durant, about 10 miles away. Officers found their bodies and apparent signs of a break-in. Their car was also missing. We now know their names. Sister Paula Merrill was a member of the Sisters of Charity of Nazareth, Kentucky. Sister Margaret Held belonged to the School Sisters of St. Francis in Milwaukee. Bishop Joseph Kopax of the Diocese of Jackson says these sisters have spent years of dedicated service here in Mississippi. They absolutely love the people in their community. We mourn with the people of Lexington and Durant, and we pray for the Sisters of Charity, the School Sisters of St. Francis, and the families left behind. There are now 250 people confirmed dead from central Italy's massive earthquake. Aftershocks now threaten to weaken more buildings already in danger of collapse. Wednesday's quake injured more than 300 people. Rescuers keep searching tonight for survivors. In central Italy, we see examples of amazing perseverance and heart-wrenching loss. Emergency crews and volunteers battle rough terrain and limited access, searching for survivors. The hands on the clock tower in the devastated town of Amatrice are frozen at 3:36 a.m., the moment the quake struck. Rescuers were overjoyed Wednesday as a little girl is found alive in the rubble. First, they see a tiny foot, then a leg, and moments later, both legs. In the video, a man seems to be talking to the girl as someone repeatedly says the name Giulia.
Dai Giulia, dai Giulia. Dai Giulia.
Rescuers then pull the girl from the rubble, completely covered in gray dust. One person crying out, "Beautiful girl," in Italian. Amatrice, just one town among many, where damaged and unstable buildings could collapse at any moment as strong aftershocks continue. Ed Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joining us. Describe the aftershocks still being felt in central Italy today, Ed.
Yeah, there were two big ones, Brian. One this morning, about 4.3 magnitude. Another one, 4.1, just about 2 hours ago, or 3 hours ago. And so there's a lot of hampering of rescue efforts going on because of that. But they're expecting quite a few more aftershocks as well in the next few days.
In the region hardest hit by the earthquake, what is the countryside like and how is that challenging rescuers?
Well, a lot of the hardest hit places are little mountaintop villages which are hard to get to. They're medieval, they've been put up there obviously to protect themselves in the medieval times, and it's very difficult to get access to those because the roads are also being damaged and the tunnels leading up to them.
And survivors who have no place to stay indoors, what kind of conditions are they facing in that mountainous region?
Well, a lot of them, I think, have been moved to the bigger cities or towns in the area. Sports centres have been opened where they've been sleeping, or they've been out camping, or they've got other neighbours who've taken them in. So they have shelter, I think, most of them. But there are many who have been left without homes over there at the moment.
And Ed, there are centuries-old buildings in these villages. Are any of them still standing after the quake?
Yes, amazingly, most of them are, or a lot of them are, and it's because they were built to withstand earthquakes, whereas the more modern buildings built in the 20th century, 21st century, have been put up rather cheaply perhaps and without much forethought, and so they've tended to collapse rather more quickly. So it's actually older medieval buildings and monasteries which have remained intact.
In fact, the monks in Norcia, the birthplace of St. Benedict, don't they have to actually leave their monastery, at least for a while?
They've chosen to leave, yes, just as a precautionary measure, also because I think they want to get out of the way so that rescue efforts can take place and the resources can be used for them rather than for the monks themselves. So they've gone away to Rome. They've left 2 monks to mind the basilica in the town. They're camping in the fields at the moment, and the rest are back in Rome, and they'll be there probably for the next few days or perhaps weeks.
All right, Ed Penton joining us from Rome from the National Catholic Register. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks, Brian.
Donald Trump postpones a policy speech on immigration originally scheduled for today. He says he will unveil his immigration policy in a week or two. Jason Calvi is here, and there is some question if Trump is backtracking on his tough stance.
Right, yeah. Trump himself admitted that there could be a softening of his immigration plans. During the primaries, Trump called for the deportation of 11 million illegal immigrants. Trump said last night he would work with them, but they'd have to pay back taxes. His campaign says his principles haven't changed.
We're very strong on illegal immigration. Don't let the media fool the media.
Donald Trump meets at Trump Tower today with Latino and Black leaders. He says people will have great respect for his soon-to-be-released immigration plan.
We either have a country or we don't. We either have borders or we don't. The wall is very important.
In the primaries, Trump's Republican foes blasted his calls for mass deportations of millions of illegal immigrants.
The idea that we're going to round 11 million people up and send them back is so it's not real.
People are now questioning where Trump will really stand on immigration.
He may have some new people putting new words in his mouth, but we know where he stands. He would form a deportation force to round up millions of immigrants and kick them out of the country.
Trump and his campaign say he'll be fair but firm.
No amnesty from him. No open borders, secure the border, build the wall, have Mexico pay for it, no sanctuary cities.
And Trump is mentioning the state of our cities and reaching out to minorities.
The African American community, because they have really been let down by Hillary Clinton and the Democrats.
But this week's NBC poll finds 87% of black voters back Clinton, only 8% Trump.
You've had her policies, Democrats, running some of the inner cities for 50, 70, 80, even over 100 years. And look what you have right now. Poverty, no education, crime.
In heated campaign words, Trump called Hillary Clinton a bigot, but she says he's the one promoting bigotry.
Donald Trump has built his campaign on prejudice and paranoia. He is taking hate groups mainstream.
Clinton says Trump's real message, make America hate again. But today, Donald Trump says blaming opponents of racism is the oldest trick in the Democratic playbook. He says shame on Clinton. He and his supporters are not racist. Brian?
Thank you, Jason. And the White House reacts to the immigration debate. Here's Chief White House Correspondent and Political Director Lauren Ashburn. Lauren?
Brian, publicly, the White House rarely wades into comments about the campaigns, but Press Secretary Josh Earnest took a jab at Trump's potential change in immigration policy.
I would expect you won't have any trouble drawing the Republican nominee's Democratic opponent into this debate. I also suspect you won't have any trouble drawing other Republicans into this debate, including people like Senator Cruz, who I saw had some pointed comments about this earlier today, too.
In fact, in May of this year, then presidential candidate Ted Cruz called Trump utterly amoral and predicted he would double-cross supporters on every issue across the board. Let's listen.
Donald will betray his supporters on every issue. If you care about immigration, Donald is laughing at you. And he's telling the moneyed elites he doesn't believe what he's saying. He's not going to build a wall. That's what he told the New York Times. He will betray you on every issue across the board.
Immigration advocates have dubbed the president deporter-in-chief and have rallied against the president's policies, saying he deported 2.5 million people. In 2012, Immigration and Customs Enforcement set a record of removing 409,000 immigrants. Since then, though, the numbers have declined to about 235,000 in the 2016 budget year. Brian?
Thank you, Lauren Ashburn at the White House. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. An hours-long attack against the American University of Afghanistan is over tonight. Wyatt Goolsby says terrorists stormed the campus, killing students and police officers.
Brian, Afghan security forces say at least 13 people were killed and 36 more were wounded in the assault. At this point, no one has claimed responsibility, but authorities suspect it's the Taliban. It took almost 9 hours for the military to secure the university's campus overnight. Among the dead, 7 students, 1 teacher, 3 police officers, and 2 security guards. Investigators say it started around 7 last night with a suicide car bomb at the university's entrance. Then 2 gunmen stormed the campus. This wounded student says he heard the explosion, then the gunfire. He says 2 bullets hit the door of their classroom and everyone escaped through the window. Afghan security forces say the attackers were armed with grenades and automatic weapons. The siege ended around 3:30 a.m. when police killed the gunman.
We condemn this attack in the strongest possible terms. An attack on a university is an attack on the future of Afghanistan.
The State Department and the Pentagon confirm a small number of American advisors embedded with Afghan security are helping on campus. The American University of Afghanistan was established in 2006, offering liberal arts courses. More than 1,000 students are enrolled. While Afghans have been working to improve security, militants are still able to carry out large-scale attacks in the country. Last week, 2 people were wounded in a bombing near the U.S. Embassy and Afghanistan's Supreme Court. Afghanistan's president blames Pakistan for the attack, saying that his neighbor is harboring Taliban supporters across the border. Pakistan denies that, saying they strongly condemn the attack. Brian?
Thank you, Wyatt Goolsby. And Iran's defense minister says his country's naval forces will warn or confront any foreign ship entering its territorial waters. 4 small Iranian boats sailed near the guided missile destroyer USS Nitsa Wednesday. The U.S. Navy describes the incident as, quote, unsafe and unprofessional. The U.S. insists the confrontation happened in international waters in the narrow Strait of Hormuz. A nonprofit Catholic organization plans to provide birth control pills at 26 clinics in St. Louis area Walgreens stores. SSM Health, founded 140 years ago by a congregation known today as the Franciscan Sisters of Mary, is now operating those clinics. The ACLU led an effort to question if the clinics would be restricted by Catholic doctrine from allowing consultations on birth control. A spokesman for SSM says it will continue the policy carried by the clinics previously run in-house by Walgreens. South Carolina's Berkeley County School Board gives final approval to opening its meetings with prayer beginning next month. That board had opened the meetings in prayer for years. It stopped, though, in June after Americans United for Separation of Church and State threatened a lawsuit. It claims prayers at public meetings violate the First Amendment. The U.S. Supreme Court recently ruled that a town council can open its meetings with prayers. Coming up, Indiana tornadoes level buildings and crush cars.
And we just piled in the closet as quick as we could. It was really scary.
Survivors share their stories. And organs for sale? Transplant patients in Iran can buy a kidney. A destructive tornado is caught on camera. Watch this Starbucks coffee shop collapse, overpowered by the swirling wind. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick. A tornado outbreak spawns at least 8 twisters across Indiana. Survivors now survey the damage.
Houses. The roof went off. I said to myself, if this is my last moment, make it, don't make it very, very painful.
Cars.
I heard a lot of screaming, a lot of people running around, make sure people were okay.
A Starbucks flattened.
We busted the bathroom doors out. There were probably about 20 people between the men's and women's restroom, but nobody was hurt.
A cluster of storms sweeps through much of Indiana.
So this is kind of ground zero, it seems like. They just come right through here.
The outbreak forces Governor Mike Pence off the campaign trail and people out of their homes.
It was just like a whole new world out here. And I shut the door, and then it blew my window out. And then that was it. I just ran downstairs. I was just so scared. How long did it take? It was too fast. I don't know.
But the storm threat couldn't stop people's will to survive.
I grabbed my dog and my disabled son who has autism and is legally blind, and we headed for the closet. and we just piled in the closet as quick as we could. It was really scary.
It will take a while to pick up the pieces and rebuild what's lost. Until then, those who saw the storms have new stories to share and perhaps a new respect for severe weather.
It's unbelievable how much Mother Nature can just destroy a place.
We thank God there are no casualties or fatalities. Mosquitoes carrying the Zika virus threaten more of Florida. A second person in Palm Beach County just contracted the virus. Dozens of other cases have been reported in the Miami area. Zika is connected with severe birth defects. The drug company Mylan says it's trying to lower the cost of its popular EpiPen 2-pack. Mylan is taking a lot of criticism for a price hike that puts it at more than $600. The company says it's now expanding programs that could cut that cost almost in half. Mylan says it's also expanding eligibility for its Patients Assistance Program. Iran cuts its waiting list for kidney transplants by allowing people to sell their organs. Donors receive about $4,500. Critics warn the system can prey on the poor, with ads promising cash for kidneys. But Iran claims it saved lives, effectively eliminating its kidney transplant waiting list. Some doctors urge America and other nations to consider adopting aspects of Iran's system. The government finances the surgery and the health coverage for the donor for at least a year. It is immoral to have too many kids in the age of climate change. A professor makes that extreme claim recently on National Public Radio. Johns Hopkins ethics professor Travis Reeder says, here's a provocative thought, maybe we should protect our kids by not having them. He continues, and this is his quote, the situation is bleak, it's just dark. Population engineering. Maybe it's an extreme move, but it gives us a chance. And just this week, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency tweeted this, pregnant? Climate change can increase health risk for you and your baby. Marco Morano is executive director of ClimateDepot.com. He produced Behind Climate Hustle, a documentary that disputes popular climate change thinking. Are these concerns over population validated?
No, absolutely not. They're part of an agenda that goes back to the 1960s, Paul Ehrlich overpopulation concern. And what they've done is they've repackaged these discredited concerns, by the way. You know, there were predictions of resource scarcity, famines, all manner of horrible things that never happened, made predictions for the 1960s and 70s. So now they're resurrecting them with the climate scare. And it's an absurd claim. It's kind of like saying I would ensure, let's save our house from fire by not building it. And that's what they're saying now. And you're seeing all these tornadoes we just saw. The implication is if everyone had had one child, these tornadoes wouldn't have happened. They're basically saying that too many kids are increasing too much emissions. Each kid is a certain amount of carbon dioxide emission based on how much resources they use. And that's creating more global warming, and therefore we need to limit our families.
In fact, that professor apparently proposes this carbon tax on kids.
Yes, they actually now they want to go after the laws, and he actually said something very interesting in his book. He says coercive population control methods are, quote, almost always wrong. Almost always, which brings up, what China's done with their one-child policy. We've had global warming scientists like Mike Holm actually praise China and talk about how much emissions China's policy has saved the world because of their draconian one-child policy, which I believe even now they've abandoned or are in the process of abandoning. So Al Gore has weighed in on this and called for fertility management as a way to fight global warming. And it's not a very far reach to figure out what fertility management is. We're talking about contraception, abortion, and in many cases even worse. And we have one NYU professor who's calling for genetic engineering to fight global warming, actually shrinking human beings. Matthew Lau.
Can we care for our environment and our people, the human life, at the same time?
Absolutely, and we've proven that we can. Our population has gone up, and our economic growth has gone up. At the same time, our air and water quality has improved dramatically here in the United States. And the same miracle awaits the developing world if we allow them to develop. Right now, places like India and Africa, they're using rivers as open sewage. We bring in modern energy, and then suddenly they have sewage treatment plants. They get modern hospitals. They clean up their environment. So yes, prosperity and modern energy is one of the best ways to clean up the environment.
Mark Morano, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Up next, shades of gray. Pope Francis wants seminarians to think beyond black and white in spiritual discernment. And celebrating God's creation, America's national parks turn 100 today. Every day I will bless thee and praise thy name forever and ever. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable. From today's responsorial, Psalm 145. Thanks for joining us this Thursday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Pope Francis says real-life situations of everyday Catholics aren't black and white, but rather vary on a spectrum of gray. His comments came in the text of a speech to members of the Jesuit order in Poland, that text published today. He says the Church needs to step up formation of seminarians about spiritual discernment. He cautions that many priests can't relate to or accompany the people they counsel because they're not properly formed. Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI says he resigned in part because he was too exhausted to continue traveling. After his long journey to Mexico and Cuba in 2012, he says he felt unable to make the trip to World Youth Day in Rio de Janeiro in 2013. He adds that St. John Paul II established World Youth Day such that the physical presence of the Pope was essential. Benedict's interview is published in the Italian daily La Repubblica. Catholic schools all over the country begin a fresh school year. Patrick Riley, president of the Cardinal Newman Society, is with us. Patrick, how do you think Catholic schools can continue to set a good example in these times of really great challenge?
Well, I prefer to think in terms of Catholic education instead of the school. Very often we think in terms of brick and mortar schools and how things are working. Catholic education has for centuries, especially here in the United States, set a very strong example because it was always rooted in the mission of the Church. It was always about evangelization. It was always about bringing young people to Christ. And as long as we focus on that in Catholic education will always have a bright future, in part because it's absolutely necessary. It's essential to our culture.
In a particular school, though, what keeps a school authentically Catholic?
Well, it's exactly that. It's keeping its eye on the mission. Catholic education has done very well in terms of teaching math, teaching science, teaching English, doing all these sorts of things, the pedagogy that's provided in Catholic education. But that's all been developed out of a strong desire and for the good of the young people as children of Christ, as future saints, as people who are trying to lead to God and not simply to a career. And as long as we do that, everything else follows and does very well.
But it is countercultural in a sense. You've got the media, society itself, the government really trying to force other ideas. Can Catholic education thrive with this countercultural approach?
I think it can. I think especially Catholic schools, elementary and secondary schools, they don't need the government funding. We do have concerns about the cost of education, but there have been a lot of innovative ways of dealing with that, partly coming out of the homeschooling movement, a lot of independent schools that are doing very well in attracting families and finding ways to educate them at a reasonable cost. And so I think there are ways of addressing that without the government funding. And so even as the government moves in a different direction, we can continue to do what we do.
The Cardinal Newman Society started with really a focus on higher education.
That's right.
You've broadened that, though, right?
That's right, we have. In a certain sense, it's the same thing. We're talking about Catholic identity, about staying true to mission. And so that's all the same across the board. But what we found is that Catholic families today increasingly need to be convinced of the special value of Catholic education. Many of them did not attend Catholic schools or did not attend Catholic schools that were maybe very strongly Catholic in their identity. And so we have to reconvince a whole generation of parents about the value of Catholic education, and we do that from elementary all the way through college.
It's important work. Patrick Riley with the Cardinal Newman Society, thank you.
Thank you.
Baseball fans get a glimpse of an Olympic gold medal swimmer. Katie Ledecky throws out the ceremonial first pitch before last night's game. At the Nationals and Orioles, she won 4 gold medals and 1 silver at the Summer Olympics in Rio. Baltimore won last night's game 10-8. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We close tonight celebrating 100 years of the National Park Service. President Woodrow Wilson signed the Organic Act of 1916 on August 25th of that year. Today, the National Park Service oversees 58 national parks and 150 national monuments. Good night. God bless you.